Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. We are about to begin shortly, and it would be great if we could ensure there are no distractions. Working from home is indeed challenging, and this session will be indeed one of a kind. We will be announcing the guest of honor shortly. Thank you for your cooperation. Assalamualaikum, good morning, and salam sejahtera to all the distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Yang Bahagia Dato Dr. IR Andy Kehesio, the co-chairman of PEMUDAH, vice president of Federal Malaysian Manufacturers, four honorable panelists including Yang Berbahagia Tan Sri Dato Teo Chiang Kok, president of Building Management Association of Malaysia, as well as co-chairman of PEMUDAH, the working group of dealing with construction permit. Yang Berbahagia Dato Suam Heng Chun, President of Real Estate and Housing Developers Association, REDA. Yang Berbahagia Dato Pritam Singh Darshan Singh, President of Property Real Estate Lawyers Association. And Architect Lilian Tay, President of Malaysian Institute of Architects, PAM. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of MPC and PEMUDAH, I would like to extend a very warm welcome to all of you to PEMUDAH webinar series, Impact of MCO on Vacant Possessions, Handover, and Strata Management Issue, the practical solutions. My name is Samsur Amanyap, and I'll be your moderator for the webinar session today. And as today is the first day of Ramadan, I would like to take this opportunity to wish all Muslim brothers and sisters a very blessed Ramadan. Semoga di bulan suci ini kita diberi petunjuknya dan selalu dalam lindungan Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala. Before commencing the opening ceremony, let me allow to introduce our guest of honor, Yang Bahagia Datuk Dr. IR Andy Xiao Kian Hao. By the way, just to let you know for all the attendees, as we have received an overwhelming registration for this particular webinar session, at the same time, we are doing a Facebook live streaming at PEMUDAH Malaysia Facebook page. Please spread the news around for all the friends that wanted to come in to this, to register and to come into this session that they couldn't come in as we are all full. At this moment, we have about 510 attendees, which is totally full. And we have about 585 attendees at the live Facebook right now. Welcome to all the attendees on the Facebook page. Thank you so much for tuning in. I wish everyone would learn something very, very useful today. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. IR Andy Xiao, a partner of Andy Xiao and Associates, a management engineering consultancy practice, and a member of Corporation of SME Corp Malaysia. He served as the executive chairman, senior advisor, and directors of various organizations. Dr. Andy served as director of German-Malaysian Institute. A part of that, Dr. Andy also served as a committee member of the Malaysian-Finnish Business Council, director of EU-Malaysian Chamber of Commerce and Industry, and SIRIM QAS International Sdn Bhd. Dr. Andy has been a director of SIRIM Berhad since July the 1st, 2015. He served as a vice president of the Federation of Malaysian Manufacturers, FMM, and council member of the Kuala Lumpur and Selangor Chinese Chamber of Commerce and Industry. Dr. Andy also served as a member of National Skills Development Council, and he served as a council member of the Institution of Engineer Malaysia. Currently, Dr. Andy is a co-chairman of the Special Task Force of Facilitate Business, PEMUDAH, alongside the Chief Secretary General to the government, Yang Berbahagia Datuk Sri Muhammad Zuki Ali. Please welcome Yang Berbahagia Datuk Andy to give his opening remarks. Please welcome Datuk.
Me. Good morning, Yang Berbahagia Tan Sri, Datuk, ladies and gentlemen. Selamat menyambut Ramadan to all our Muslim friends. I'm Andy Xiao, co-chair of PEMUDAH. As mentioned, the PEMUDAH is the special task force to facilitate business, which was established 13 years ago to bridge the gap between the private and public sector by addressing business issues and providing pertinent recommendations to facilitate business. Now, the collaboration between PEMUDAH's public and private sectors members assist policymakers in making sound and workable solutions. The Government Movement Control Order, MCO, which is a countermeasure imposed against the spread of COVID-19 virus pandemic across the entire country, is impacting in an unprecedented, catastrophic, and systematic way on all sectors of economy, as well as on the everyday lives of all Malaysians. Now, non-essential businesses have to cease operations. Supply chain in so many industries are being disrupted. Financial losses and losses of business opportunity are mounting. The education of our children is also slightly delayed. These losses and inconveniences are unavoidable price to pay, and that all Malaysians have to fight this against this virus. Now, property and real estate investment are big budget items for businesses and individuals. The MCO has moved the property development and building management industry into uncharted territory for all the stakeholders who are reviewing their contractual and statutory rights, obligation, and recourses to protect their interests. Now, PEMUDAH has decided to reach out to Malaysian public to enable them to spend their stay-at-home time constructively by sharing via a series of webinars, practical solutions and tips on how to deal with issues arising as a result of this MCO period. Now, today I would like to welcome all of you to PEMUDAH's first webinar series entitled Impact of Movement Control Order on Vacant Possession Handover and Strata Management Issues and Practical Solutions. Now, our webinar today will provide clarity with where uncertainty prevails, and solutions to unlock divergent positions. Litigation or arbitration should only be our last resort. Now, we are honored to have with us today our panel distinguished industry leaders in property development, building management, and professional architectural services, as well as property and real estate specialized solicitor. They are none other than Yang Bahagia Tan Sri Teo Chang Kok, President of the Building Management Association of Malaysia, and he is also the co-chair of our PEMUDAH Technical Working Group on dealing with construction permits. Now, second speaker is Yang Bahagia Dato' Som Heng Chun, the President of REDA, Real Estate Housing Developer Association of Malaysia. Yang Bahagia Dato' Pratam Singh, Darshan Singh, President of Property Real Estate Lawyers Association, and Architect Lilian Tay, President of Malaysian Institute of Architects, PEM. Now, our moderator for the session today is Tuan Haji Samsul Rahman Yap. He is the MPC Associate and also an architect by profession. I take this opportunity to thank each and every one of the frontline doctors and nurses and all the other supporting medical and healthcare workers for their tremendous hard work and self-sacrifices in keeping our people safe and in saving lives. We also wish to thank all the staff in MITI and the other ministries together with the industry in ensuring that the essential services and supplies to the people can still be accessed through adequate food and medical supplies, utility services, and other amenities. Now, with that, ladies and gentlemen, I wish you all a fruitful session. Now, be sure to look out for the next PEMUDAH webinar in the series. Selamat menyambut Ramadan to all our Muslim friends, and thank you.
Thank you, Yang Berbahagia Dato' Andy Xiao, on delivering his welcoming note. And as what Dato' Andy is saying just now, this particular webinar session is intended to give clarity on a lot of issues that arise in the industry, as also the stakeholder, as well as the public. So we are gathering all the specialists here today, and hopefully we could give you a clarity on all the questions arise throughout the entire whole MCO period so far. By not delaying again, let's start the entire whole series. Every one of us in a lifetime, most of us could maybe just can afford to buy one house and one property. And some of us, some of our friends and colleagues and family members just happen that they are intended to celebrate the Raya, the Ramadan in this new house. The MCO happened. Money has gone and money has been paid. And now the entire whole, just at the end of this particular junction of time, the house cannot deliver because of the whole MCO happened. So what are the impact of MCO on vacant possession or handover? First, I would like to welcome our first panelist, Dato' Som Heng Chun. But before I pass the line to Dato Som, let me introduce him in his background. Dato Som was appointed as Executive Director on 25th of May 2004 and subsequently the Managing Director on 2nd October 2006. He was designated as CEO and MD on the 1st February he graduated from University of Strata, United Kingdom with a Bachelor of Science with first class honor in civil engineering. He was with the Ministry of Work for 10 years prior joining Road Builders Malaysia Holding Berhad Group in 1989. He has extensive experience in construction and property development. He is a professor engineer and a member of Institution of Engineer Malaysia. He is also the Managing Director of RB Land Sdn Bhd and IJM Property Sdn Bhd. His directorship in other public companies including IJM as a Deputy Chief Executive Officer and Deputy Managing Director and ERMS Berhad. He also served as a trustee of Construction Research Institute Malaysia, CRIM. Currently, Dato Som is the President of Real Estate Housing Developers Association Malaysia, REDA Malaysia. Welcome, Dato Som. Dato, can you hear me?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now, yes.
Okay. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Firstly, let me wish all our Muslim friends Salam Ramadan and Selamat Berpuasa. And as you have mentioned, and Dato' NDCO has mentioned that we are in uncharted territory because of the effect of the pandemic of COVID-19 and its effect from the MCO being implemented by the government under Act 342. So maybe I will do it this way. First, I will explain the flow of my discussion. Firstly, I would like to ask a question like, is MCO implementation a force majeure event? What is the impact of MCO on ongoing projects? What are the contractual obligations between developers and purchasers? Proposed remedies under the current Housing Development Control Act and the Regulation and Development Control Licensing 1989? And what is the best option apart from the best remedy under the current contract? Like what REDA has been advocating for, the government to actually come up with a temporary measure, COVID-19 bill. So maybe I go back to the start. Is the MCO implementation a force majeure event? Everyone know that we have now gone through 3 phases of the MCO. First phase from 18th of March to 31st of March. Second phase, MCO2, is 1st of April to 14th of April. Third phase of MCO from the 15th of April to 28th of April, which is another few more days. And of course, yesterday the PM just announced the MCO4, which is from 29th of April to 12th of May. So in total, there are 56 days of MCO, provided there's no more extension. Okay, if there's extension, it will be longer than the 56 days. A question being asked is the MCO event a force majeure event? I think later on, Dato' Pritam will actually explain the force majeure. What is a force majeure? I think Architect Lilian Tay will also bring up what is the force majeure. And if we just track back 2 days ago, when our Minister of Work, Senior Minister of Works, attended a press conference in Putrajaya, during the question and answer, he did actually specifically say that this is a force majeure event, an event that happens due to no fault of any of the contracting parties. Okay, so for here is our stand in REDA is that this is a force majeure event. To us, this is a force majeure event. And then the next question asks, what is the impact of the force of this MCO on ongoing development projects? Here, I'm not talking about other impact. I'm just purely talking about contractual impact here. And what I want to highlight here is that the impact, other than talking about other impact like cash flow and the rest, firstly, there's no work on site. Okay, there's no progress on site. There's no physical work at all. Second, offices of government departments, financial institution, developers are all closed, except for essential services. So if anybody do anything in the office and send out letters, you are flouting the MCO laws. Okay, the other is the impact is on obligation, both the obligation of the buyers towards the developer and the obligation of the developers to the buyers and the financials. Those obligations, can it be met or not? And there are many instances, I will explain a bit later, some of the incidents and some of the events that both parties cannot actually meet. Okay, so maybe I quickly go through what are the obligations that both the buyers and the developers cannot meet. Okay, first, on the buyer perspective, these are some of the obligations that the buyer cannot meet. First, late payment charges under clause 10 of Schedule G and H. Okay, developers raise billings and their late payment charges from buyer due to delay in obtaining loan approval, and the delay in the completion of a loan document, and delay in payment by purchaser and financer during the MCO period. Okay, this is covered. So these are obligations that the buyer cannot actually meet. Second, the item 2 is on third schedule of Schedule H, G, and H. For cash payment, the purchaser will be unable to pay within the stipulated due date in the SPA, which is 30 days. So when the billing is raised before MCO, example, MCO started on the 18th of March, MCO started on the, I think the announcement was on the 2 days before that, on the 16th, it was announced. Example, if a billing was raised 3 days, 5 days, or a week before MCO, and it has been sent out, and now 30 days has lapsed. So the buyer, the purchaser, will actually be unable to pay because finances office are closed. So then it will attract overdue interest. Third item, clause 27 of Schedule G and clause 30 of Schedule H. Purchaser is unable to lodge the defects complaint to the developer within the 24 months expiry. So if, let's say, the expiry is within this 50 days of the MCO, okay, is on the 22nd month or 23rd month. Suddenly, because of the MCO, you cannot go out and lodge your additional defects. The 24 months then lapse. So the rights of the purchaser are actually affected, and the defects will not be rectified during this period. Item 4, the impact on buyers as well. Purchaser is unable to pay within the stipulated date in the SPA. This is under item 2 of the third schedule of G and H. So purchaser is unable to pay, example, billing raised before MCO and through the MCO period. As I mentioned, let's say billing has been raised the 1st or 2nd week of March, and then because we transient the MCO period, the buyers are not able to pay within that period. The fifth item is actually on clause 5, Schedule G and H, manner of payment. Construction work are halted due to MCO. Certificate. This is, I think, not this one. Haji, I think not this one. Clause 5, Schedule G and H. Any billings raised during the MCO period or before buyer will not be able to pay. Then after that is a clause 6 and 7 of the Schedule G and H. The inability to obtain mortgage financing within 30 days, either from the private financer or from government. You see, the LPPSA office is also closed. So for government servants who are taking government loan, they are also not able to comply to the 30 days requirement. Okay, the next is actually clause 9 of Schedule G and H. Time is the essence of contract. I think this is also because now time is, to me, is at large. Okay, because it's due to no fault ours. This 56 days, we can't do anything. Clause 10 and 11 of the Schedule G and H on late payment charges and the default by purchaser. So because of the late payment, sometimes it triggers a default by purchasers. And on clause 27, taking delivery of VP is not possible now within the 30 days. Example, a billing has been raised, a letter has been sent by developers to purchaser to ask purchaser to come and take the vacant possession. And within 30 days, if they don't actually come, is deemed to have delivered vacant possession. So in this current instance, if the VP letter had been sent prior to the MCO, so a lot of purchasers will not be able to meet this deadline. So these are some of the obligation under the SPA where buyers are not able to meet. Then I come to the developers part. There are also obligation by the developers which they cannot meet. Okay, first, the impact on developers. This current Housing Act 118 and also the regulation 1989 actually doesn't have a force majeure clause. So in our contract, there's no force majeure clause. Because there's no force majeure clause, automatically we have to look for other avenue in the Housing Act to see whether developers and the buyers' rights can be protected. So some of the developers' obligation that cannot be met include clause 24, schedule G, delay in VP, thus attracting LAD. Okay, due to MCO, there will be no physical progress on site, so we cannot do any work. So we cannot complete. So we are now with the MCO 4, there will be 56 days where many of the projects don't have any physical work on site. Of course, I come back to the one previous on the no work at site, because during MCO 3, I think the government has actually loosened some of the condition to allow projects with 90% progress to actually commence. But until today, it's already 2 weeks from the day it was given announced that we can recommence. But until today, I don't think hardly any contractors or developer has commenced work on site. The next clause is actually clause 29, schedule G, and clause 32 of schedule H. Developer is unable to serve the notice of VP and progress billing by registered post. I think there have been some question asked whether by email is good enough or not. But I think the schedule in the SPA is clearly stated it has to be by registered post or has to be hand delivered by the solicitor to the buyers. So an email, I don't think is good enough. So if our office is closed, even though the post office is open, we still cannot send out the mail. So we cannot actually deliver VP to the buyers. So in this aspect, I think we cannot meet the obligation as well. And next is Section 8A under the HDA Act. Purchaser has unilateral right to terminate the SPA at any time if the controller of housing certified that the developer has no work at site for continuous 6 months or more after execution of SPA. Example, before the start of the MCO, okay, it's only 5 months from the date of first signing of the SPA. And then now we have gone beyond the 6 months. So now actually the purchaser has the unilateral right to actually terminate the SPA. Okay, the non-commencement of work at site is not due to the fault of the developers, but because of the MCO, he's not able to commence. So this will trigger the event under Section 8A of the HDA Act 1966. So these are some of the obligations that are highlighted that both purchaser and developers are unable to meet. Of course, there may be others, but I just highlight these some valid points here that I think we can discuss a bit later. So what are the remedies now under the current HDA? As mentioned just now, the current HDA Act 118 does not have a force majeure clause. So the need to seek remedies under other sections of the HDA to protect both the buyers and the developers owing to MCO, which is an event not caused by either parties. Okay, since Section 11.3 of the regulation is now ultra-virus, the remedy possible, the only remedy possible is under Section 2.2 of the Act 118, under Act 118. So I think this Dato' Pritam later on will explain a bit more on Section 2.2. And the remedies requested is that buyers be relieved of paying any overdue interest for the duration of the period where the developers are given extension of time by the minister. And we ask that developers be granted automatic extension of time based on a period to be decided by the minister. So I think the minister will execute and use her power or invoke her power under Section 22 of the Housing Act 1966. And of course, the best option that we have, come to the best option that I think we can look at is actually under the proposed temporary measure bill that we have actually proposed to the government. Okay, in Singapore, of course, our neighbor has actually invoked a bill, but I think Dato' Pritam will also explain later why the bill in Singapore does not highlight about property development, because they still have the Section 12, the old Section 12, which is available there. So in ours, because 11.3 under the regulation has been made ultra virus, so for us is the remedy, the best remedy to protect both parties and to prevent any sort of penalization and costly litigation is actually for the government to enact and act. And I think the Senior Minister of Works during his question and answer 2 days ago did mention that this was brought up in cabinet, and it will then be, if required, it will be brought up as a new bill in the coming parliament sitting. So we hope that this will come to fruition so that all the parties, contracting parties, will be protected here. I think there are also questions related to the contract between the contractor and the developer. I think that Lillian will deal with it. I don't want to go into that as to the contract between the contractor and the developer, and whether there's a force majeure clause there and whatever. I let her deal with that. So for now, for developers out there, and I think some of you are very anxious because MCO is already 56 days, and many of you are asking if my project is supposed to finish in the month of March, or my project is supposed to finish in the month of April, May. Okay, now the MCO extended until May, and even June, July, August, we may not be able to complete. Okay, what then should we do? So just let you know that Reda have been working closely with Ministry of Housing, Jabatan Perumahan Negara. I think probably the DG is also listening in this morning, and we have coined a FAQ together, and Reda will be sending out this FAQ latest by next week to all our members and also fellow developers on what they can do with regards to the EOT. And we also hope that all parties concerned will use their best discretion in handling this matter during this very difficult period for all the parties here. So maybe, Aiman, I leave it back to you.
Okay.
Then later on we can discuss other issues if there are questions.
Sure. Thank you, Dr. Som. Thank you. I think we hear from all the action and all the measurement that what radar has been raised, specifically handling on between the developer and also purchaser. And we hear you, developer side is actually also having a big impact due to this particular due to the MCO. And I think that is what sometimes is the public, somehow it is misleading that developer don't not impacted much, but what we heard from you is actually there's a lot of impact on the developer, and like what you say just now, the purchaser can just go and terminate the SPN, but say no, I'm not going to buy anymore, and a lot of things that is also under developer the requirement that it cannot be done because of MCO. So thank you so much from your side, Dr. Som. Now let me go to the next panelist. Let us welcome Architect Lillian Tay. Before Architect Lillian starts, let me just go through a little bit of her background. Architect Lillian Tay is the design principal at Veritas Architects Sdn Bhd, an award-winning Malaysian architectural firm established in 1987. Veritas aspire to create architecture that respond to the local place and culture. With their office at KLCC the past 19 years, Veritas is attuned and passionate about KL urban environment. Veritas' notable project includes PKNS HQ, Menara Binjai, DJ HQ, One Central, Ministry of Natural Resources and Environment, Putrajaya Central, Kuala Lumpur MRT stations, W Hotel, Singke Hotel, Star Residences, and Oxley Towers. As the current president of Pertubuhan Architect Malaysia, PEM, her goal is to promote an expertise of Malaysia professional architects and to enhance opportunity for Malaysian architects to serve our community and contribute meaningful to nation's building. Architect Lilian Tay trained at Princeton University, USA, and worked at KPF New York before returning to Kuala Lumpur, where she has been a director at Veritas since 1995. Please welcome Architect Lilian Tay.
Hello, hi. Sorry.
Hi, good morning. Hi.
I'm here today as president of the Institute of Architects and not on behalf of my company. Sorry about that. Okay, I think we are really today, the last few months, facing unprecedented challenges. I think the whole nation is facing unprecedented challenges. Not just are we battling a nationwide public health crisis, but we will very soon be having to address how to resume economic activities and how to rebound the economy, and how to step up and start on the path to recovery. Well, architects have been, well, I put this picture up here because it has really made such a change to the city. We are really experiencing our homes and our cities in different ways during this MCO period. It's very, very busy heart of Kuala Lumpur, which is just right opposite our office. It's totally deserted. You can see very much that the whole lockdown has severely impacted all sectors, all economic sectors across the country: manufacturing, construction, retail. So it's also I can understand that the government is trying very hard to really start steps to recovery and steps to normalcy. I think I'll go through quite quickly the timeline. It's interesting to note that the MCO declared
Architect Lilian, sorry to disturb. Your voice is a bit like far away. Can you come closer to the microphone area, perhaps?
Okay, is that better?
Yes, this better. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've just sort of locked down a timeline to just appreciate where we are. As you can see, the nationwide MCO movement control order was declared barely a week after our cabinet was appointed. So it's quite a task, a national task, I think, for everyone to step up to this huge challenge to first manage the public health crisis with this very new cabinet in place. And really, they have done an incredible job. I think over the last 1-2 months, I have seen them working very hard, not just from the public health crisis managing, but also looking at the whole impact on the economy and taking steps early to make sure that we will be on a firm step to recovery. As mentioned earlier by Dr. Som, MCO started already on the 18th March, and today we are coming close to the end of 6 weeks of the MCO. Quite early on the 10th of April, 4 weeks, not even 4 weeks, well, about 4 weeks into the MCO, I think MITI has already issued the list of additional sectors that are allowed to apply for operating permit. This is with the intention to start the whole process to rebound the economy, especially in the construction sector. And the latest that we know that as of 2 days ago, close to 1,856 or close to 2,000 projects, construction projects out of 19,000 applications, some 10% that had submitted had actually been approved to restart and resume construction works. 5 weeks, this is 5 weeks from the start of MCO. Of course, hopefully we will see the end of this period by 12th of May, but possibly it may also proceed, it may also be extended further. We don't know. And then of course we are coming into Hari Raya. So there could be a potential period that this nation has gone through that could be 8 to 10 weeks. How do I move the slide forward? Right. As we know, with the declaration of the MCO across the nation on the 16th and to start on the 18th, all construction works have to be suspended, all construction works. And only essential works and works in progress, which if left unattended, would pose a public safety risk. This, of course, causes delay to the completion of all the projects under construction in the country, and eventually to the developer's handover date for vacant possession to its purchasers. Can I move this on my own, Shankar?
Okay, let me just do it for you. All right. Okay.
Sorry, I didn't know how to.
Okay.
Okay.
Yes.
So right early on the immediate upon the announcement of the MCO, we had advised all our architects to also issue a notice to all the contractors on their projects to comply, well, at least in compliance to our PEM contract as a provision for compliance to statutory requirements, clause 4.1, where the contractor shall comply with all notices required by any laws, regulations, bylaws of any appropriate authority. This definitely causes works to come to a standstill. Okay, next.
Yeah, you can use your screen to button.
Move forward. Move forward. How do I move forward on the just return? Okay, good. Of course, the PEM contract, I think, and most of the construction projects in the country are using one of the standard forms of contract. I do believe the PEM contract 2006 or 2018 would be used by the bulk of projects under construction currently. And of course, we do have a provision in clause 23 for extension of time. And of course, the contractors would have to follow the due process and procedures to give notice of delay within 28 days of the commencement of the relevant event. In this case, the declaration of MCO on the 18th of March, and to also submit the claim for extension of time within 28 days of the end of the cause of delay. Now, this is, of course, a complicated one. Even though the MCO period may be 8 weeks or 10 weeks, there will be a lot of work needed to be done by the architects and engineers to really assess the attendant delay following to restart work as well. Of course, some contractors who had obtained permit will be able to start work from the time they obtain permit, not the full extent of work, but limited to half the pace to be able to maintain all the public health requirements that has been established by KKM, CIDB as well. For instance, maintaining social distancing even on the site, and to, of course, maintain a clean, sanitized environment to ensure that the construction sites does not become an area for infection. Not just for the workers, but also for all the whole supply chain that will need to support the construction works, and also including consultants such as architects and engineers who will have to go to site because construction work cannot proceed without the supervision of the architects and engineers who are the principal submitting parties for construction projects. Okay, I think we should go back. Sorry, I didn't. Can we go back? I think in the PEM contract, it sets, we have a very clear definition for force majeure, a clear and simple definition. Of course, we all know the whole force majeure came originated from the Napoleonic Code in the early 19th century. But basically, if we understand the basic principle, it is a principle of law that sets, that basically sets out the allocation of risk and the cost and the fair bearing of the cost between the parties because of the fact that the costs are not within the control of either of the contracting parties. I think Dr. Sohm also mentioned earlier. And PAM 2006 as well as 2018 have a very clean and simple definition, which means force majeure means any circumstances beyond the control of the contractor caused by terrorist acts, government or regulatory action, epidemics and natural disaster. So on 2 counts, government regulatory action in terms of the MCO order, as well as, of course, the national public health crisis. In fact, it's not just for the nation, but a global pandemic, a much larger scale of an epidemic. There are, of course, other forms of building contract used in Malaysia, such as, of course, the PWD 203A, which used for most government projects, also includes a force majeure provision, even though on the list of specific events that had been provided for within this PWD 203, it does not specifically mention epidemic situations such as we have. However, I do believe the government has already made announcements early on that it will abide by this principles of force majeure, even in projects that are under the PWD 203A. I think some projects, particularly engineering projects, would be using FIDIC form of contract that also defines all the attributes of force majeure events and then sets out a list of events, but with no specific mention of a pandemic situation. Basically, it sets out the criteria on which one can determine whether the causal event is a force majeure event, but does not have a list. But of course, it's not a specific list. So I do believe that could be the case for force majeure could be made in the FIDIC contract situation. Okay, so I do believe actually the times ahead as we start work is going to be a complex period of trying to ascertain the real delay that has been caused, mainly, and it differs practically on every project. It will, of course, make it quite tedious for architects, engineers, and the consultants to assess as the contractor starts work, because he's not able to mobilize his full manpower resources on there. Could be some of his lost some workers, and some of his subcontractors and tradesmen may not yet be able to start work. We do hope, of course, the construction permit that's issued for projects will also automatically allow all the attendant consultants and the whole supply chain to be also accorded permission to start work in tandem with the contractor's permit, so that work can really move on. Because as mentioned earlier, no works can actually happen on the site without the proper supervision of the engineer and architects. So, and of course, for PAM contract, with the clear definition of force majeure, it would be clear that the contractor should be entitled to additional time due to the delaying event. And the difficulty is really to assess how much how much beyond the period of the MCO, what's the time that should be rightfully taken to step back up to a normal rate of work. I think this is the complex, a complex assessment, and they may perhaps be a lot of dispute and work for lawyers, Dr. Pritam. But of course, I think countries like Singapore had also tried not to burden their legal courts with this. In anticipation of that, had already passed a temporary measures bill, a COVID-19 temporary measures bill, where they have set up certain assessment panels to deal with consumer disputes arising from the MCO. However, I think the Singapore contracts does provide for the resolution of delay on construction projects already. So that's not actually specifically covered in the temporary measures bill. Okay, so those are the key issues. Sorry, if we can go back. The assessment of extension of time and the allocation of the loss and expense to, obviously, we don't believe that in such a situation, the contractor would of course have to, bear the costs for that. They will get additional time, but they shouldn't be bearing the loss, but they should be also bearing the loss and expense for that period. Okay. So the delay to the developer's handover of vacant possession to purchasers is inevitable on many of those projects. And as mentioned earlier by Dr. Som, they have been looking at it, how to address this issue and to also fairly and equitably allocate the cost of that. As he also mentioned, the HDA has no express provision for extended time to hand over to vacant possession to purchasers beyond the date set in the SPA in Schedule H and G. Okay. Okay, next. Okay, as he also highlighted, and we do know that the Housing Development Act 1966 the minister does have powers within that act to exempt any housing developer or housing accommodation from any or all of the provisions of this act. And such exemption may be granted for such duration and subject to such limitations, restrictions, or conditions as the minister may specify in the order. I think this is a very important provision in the Act, and I think it is now that we will see the need to call on this provision in the Act to be able to ensure that all parties are sort of sharing the burden in an equitable manner so that we can really move forward on this, since there are no specific provisions for extension of time in the sale and purchase agreement, Schedule H or G. It would seem that we would all need to rely on the minister to make a fair assessment of the delay that is actually incurred by the MCO, and also some form of recognition also of the delay that will be incurred to just get back to the normal pace of work. So that is the complex, that's not an easy solution because that's not an easy number to determine since every project are different. As you know, MITI had allowed 4 different types of projects to start in the list of additional sectors that were permitted to apply for operating permit. Of course, it included contract works being performed by G1, G2 contractors, which are smaller works below 500,000. This is also with the good intent to allow smaller contractors to proceed with their works. Another area, those projects which have a high IBS count of 70, which will ensure that it will be less labor intensive and therefore easier to maintain the type of distancing that would be required during this period. We are quite sure that such practice for social distancing and safe health and safety practice on the site and among all the participants on the site, from workers, tradesmen, contractors, consultants, resident site staff, all that may continue for a period much longer than the end of the MCO. I do believe that I'm sure we will be asked to practice such health and safety practices, including those set out by CIDB, that for the next few months, even after the end of the MCO. So there is a lot of attendant delay to every project that will go on far beyond the time period of 6 weeks or potentially 8 weeks, or potentially 10 weeks. It will go beyond that. Whether the minister may decide on a fixed period and then everyone has to bear the plus and minuses of how it falls out on each, or whether we go through a long tedious process of doing a specific extension of time through assessment, that will make it also very difficult to administer should the powers of the minister be exercised to address this situation. Of course, the best way is that it should be as expeditious as possible so that we can all get on with starting back up full works and on the road to recovery. Next. Okay, well, this is one of the pictures I've seen. Credit to the drone photographer, but I thought it was a spectacular but also a very sad view of my favorite part of town, just right opposite our office, a town that's the city that's totally deserted. So I do hope that we will soon bring life back to our cities, and that whatever we proceed, we must share what we must work on the principles that our Prime Minister has called on, which is to share the burden across. And where there are gaps in the law, I think we should be driven by that we should all, in an equitable manner, share the impact and the adverse cost, all the cost of this whole event, so that we can all move forward and no one is left behind. So thank you. That's my short presentation.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Architect Lilinte. We have heard the Architect Lilinte, her point of view that perhaps the decision of the minister is required now in this particular junction of time, so that it can be moving the entire whole industry a little bit more faster pace. Let's listen to our next speaker, Dr. Pritam Singh. But before I pass the mic to Dr. Pritam, just let me introduce Yang Berbahagia Dr. Pritam Singh Darshan Singh. Dr. Pritam Singh is the founder of Pritam Singh, Nora and Company, and also a former vice chairman and president of the Tribunal for Home Buyers Claim. He is a lawyer by profession, was previously a senior federal counsel, deputy public prosecutor with the Attorney General Chambers, and legal advisor to several government ministries and agencies. His practice is highly regarded and recognized by major developers, bankers, financial institutions, and GLCs in property and land matters. He is also the president of Property Real Estate Lawyer Association. He is a well sought after public speaker both locally and internationally. He is a major contributor of articles on property related issues to the social and print media. Please welcome Yang Berbahagia Dr. Pritam Singh. Hi, Dato'.
Are we on?
Yeah, good morning, Dato'.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
You can hear me?
Yes.
All right. Let's thank you very much for inviting us to join this discussion. I think the discussion is very important and pertinent at this time of the day, and also at this time of the year, and also in this time of the MCO. What is happening outside?
Dato', are you okay? Can you just continue to speak? Yeah, I think it's okay.
Are you able to hear me? Yes.
Yeah, this is better now. Yeah.
Okay. I think it's very pertinent for us to discuss some of the points that has been raised by Dr. Foh and Lillian before me, so that we can formulate some answers. Because this pandemic has no basis before, so we have to rely on some examples that has taken place in history in Malaysia before. So let's look at force majeure. What is actually force majeure? Force majeure can be an event or an effect that can be neither anticipated or controlled. It's a contractual provision allowing the risk of the loss if performance becomes impossible or impracticable, especially as a result of an event the parties could not have anticipated or controlled. And it can also amount to hurricanes, government action, explosion, fire, plagues, epidemic, which is non-exhaustive, and such other acts or events that are beyond the control of parties. So to my mind, COVID-19 and the MCO certainly falls as a pandemic, an epidemic, or an outbreak of disease, or an act of God. Some people may disagree. President USA say it's not an act of God, it's a creation, but we will take that separately. But I can still think that COVID-19 is not man-made. It is actually an act of God. It's neither an act of government, but the government's duty to enforce MCO is provided for in the Act. Therefore, they must also fall within the ambit of event beyond the control of the parties. Very important for us to note at this stage is for force majeure to take place, or force majeure event to be recognized, there must be in the contract itself a provision relating to force majeure. Let's look at Schedule G and Schedule H. Our standard agreement, every purchaser has to sign either in Schedule G for landed property or Schedule H for stratified property. Both the agreements do not have a force majeure clause. What would be the effect? The effect is neither can the developer rely on anything in the Act to delay the performance of their express duties under the Act, under the SPA, or neither can the purchasers rely on any of the provisions under Schedule G or Schedule H to delay their performance. So we have performance of two parties here, performance of the developer on one hand, performance of the purchaser on the other hand. Since there is no force majeure clause, both parties cannot rely on the SPA to sustain an argument that they are now currently going through a force majeure event. Therefore, next. Can they rely on frustration? We have Section 57 of our Contracts Act talk about an event of frustration of a contract. What is frustration? The event occurred subsequent to the formation of the contract. The event was not contemplated by the contract. The event rendered performance of the contract physically and legally impossible, as opposed to more difficult and fundamentally alter the obligation of the contract. The event occurred through no fault of the party. I would like to highlight item number 3. The event rendered performance of the contract physically or legally impossible. I don't think Schedule G, Schedule H is now physically or legally impossible. No one has ever said that the Schedule G and Schedule H is now not applicable. The Schedule G and Schedule H agreements, standard provision in law relating to developers' duties, the duties of the purchasers is still there. It has not become illegal. It has not become impossible. What it has become is, it has become more difficult. Or it also does not sustain or fundamentally alter the obligation. To my mind, it has become a bit more difficult, but it does not alter the obligations of the parties. Therefore, a frustration of contract, to my mind, will not be applicable in instances of pandemic COVID-19. When we talk about delivery of vacant possession, just generally speaking, there's a lot of activity that need to be carried out by the developer before the developer can hand over vacant possession. Number one, there has to be a certificate of completion and compliance, not a certificate of CPC, certificate of practical completion, because the certificate of practical completion is between the contractor and the developer. But CCC certificate or certificate of completion and compliance is between, of course, it is also between the developer and the architect. But this is the certificate that is relevant for purposes of granting vacant possession. When above that, the developer also have to obtain strata title. Now, if the government department, the land office is closed, it becomes impossible for them to get strata title during this period. Then water and electricity supply ready for connection. It's the duty of the developer to make sure the water and electricity supply are ready for connection. Ready for connection means available for tapping into individual units. The substation has been energized, but it is the duty of the purchasers to look for meters, water meter and electricity. If any of these things are not in place, then the water and electricity supply is actually not ready for connection. And therefore, the handing over of the vacant possession, the delivery of the vacant possession is going to be delayed. Concurrently, if there are any additional alteration work that need to be carried out by the developer on behalf of the purchaser, this has to be done before the delivery of vacant possession. It cannot be delayed. Therefore, if you look at these 4 items, there is substantially a big amount of activity involving not only the architect, the engineer, the contractor, the developer, land office, various government departments, private government agencies handling water, handling electricity, maybe some other contractors doing alteration additional work. And in all these agreements with the suppliers, for example, with the electricity supplier, PNB, if there is no force majeure clause in those agreements, then we also have a problem. If there is no force majeure clause in the water supply, company, then you have a problem. Then with the subcontractors who are doing additional work, you also have a problem. That is why very important is there must be a clause in all these agreements relating to force majeure. Next. Lucky for us, at one time in 1989, when the Housing Development Control and Licensing Regulation was enacted, we had a clause called Regulation Level 3. Under those clause, the controller, if he is satisfied due to special circumstances or hardship and necessity compliance with any of the provision of the contract or sale is impracticable or unnecessary, he may, by a certificate in writing, waive or modify such. This has been a very landmark provision all the way back since 1989. In fact, I did study the legislative history of this Regulation 11.3. There was a big dispute going on at that time during the drafting stage of Regulation 11.3 because I have subsequently been legal advisor of ministry. So I had opportunity to read some of the background knowledge as to why this clause was drafted. You see, there was a true school of thought. The developers on that stage, at that stage, they wanted this to be in the standard agreement. They say, well, how can you not have a force majeure clause in Schedule G and Schedule H? Whereas another school of thought from the ministry side was that no, there is no necessity to have force majeure clause or extension of time clause. Subsequently, over a period of time, maybe 6 months to nearly a year of this ding-dong between the parties, they subsequently agreed that the force majeure clause, which is supposed to be in every construction contract, and which actually has been removed from Schedule G and Schedule H, should be parked with an independent person. And the independent person is the controller of housing. That is how the controller of housing came into being as the regulator in relation to force majeure. It may not be drafted as a force majeure clause, but it looks like a force majeure clause. Because we tried to copy others, but this was drafted in 1989, and it is our force majeure clause, and the controller is the one who can give extension. Next. You see, when we did our 1989 regulation, we had at the back of our mind the 1985 Singapore Housing Developers Rules, which came out before our 1989 regulation. In the Singapore Housing Developers Rules, they also have a similar provision and much wider provision. They say no amendment, deletion, alteration shall be made to the agreement referred to, blah, 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 except with the prior approval of the controller in writing. Any amendment, deletion, alteration to the agreement referred to made without the prior approval in writing of the controller shall be null and void. Therefore, the Singapore provision is still there. It is still applicable in Singapore. Our regulation 11.3 had a hiccup. Singapore 12.3 continue to be operative, and I will explain that in a while. Next. You see, we had this case of Ang Min Lee and others, which is Menteri Kesejahteraan Bandar, the TPKT, and others. The federal court made a ruling that regulation 11.3 conferring power on the controller to waive and modify the terms and conditions of the contract of sale is ultra vires the Housing Development Control and Licensing Act 1966, virtually throwing out the whole of regulation 11.3 down the bin. So we have the Singapore position, 12.3 is still lawful and applicable. Our 11.3 is no more lawful. It is ultra vires and unapplicable. Therefore, when the Singapore came up with the COVID-19 temporary measures bill, they did not touch on housing matters. They did not touch on their standard housing agreements because their 12.3 is still valid. They can still use their 12.3 to make changes or allow for waiver or modification. But we cannot rely on 11.3 to make waivers or modification to the terms and conditions of the contract. Therefore, we are now faced with a dilemma. What can we really do? We have only one saving section. Of course, there are other sections like section 11, section 12, but that is where the developer is actually going to go shop. Then the minister can give directions to safeguard the interests of house purchasers. But in a situation like a pandemic, where actually the developer is not closing shop, but only it's become more difficult for him to perform, it is my view that Section 2.2 of the Housing Developers Control and License Act ought to be used by the minister to give exemption to the housing developer or accommodation from all or any of the provision of the Act. And Schedule G and Schedule H are enacted under the Act and therefore part of the Act. And such exemption can be granted for such duration as specified in the order. This is very important because if you look at historically, when the Highland Towers collapsed, if you all can remember, the Highland Towers collapsed, and many purchasers, many developers were actually affected because all high-rise buildings came to a stop then. All high-rise buildings came to a stop for reason not related to them. Just because Highland Tower is in Ampang, the whole country's high-rise buildings were granted a temporary stop order. Then when the minister then subsequently realized and the developers put in an application, then a duration was fixed. In that case, if I'm not wrong, I think a duration of 6 months was given. Although the stop order was much less than that, I think in order to have a getting up for them to perform a fixed amount of time or period was fixed, say about 6 months. To my mind, that is much easier rather than every purchase developer putting in an application and arguing that his is 3 months, his should be 2 months, 1 month, things like that, and there will be a lot of dispute, which again will end up in court and Section 2.2 may be challenged. So to have a standard period above the board for everybody may be a way forward. In granting this exemption to the developer, the minister cannot overlook the interests of the house purchasers. That is very important. So the minister can give restriction or can impose condition as may be specified in the order. Like for example, Dr. Som has actually very beautifully laid out all the obligations of the purchasers that have to be considered. We cannot give just the developers the extension of time without considering the difficulties the purchasers have faced or will be faced in the near future. I think there has to be a balance between developers' interests, of course, the financiers' interests, the purchasers' interests, and other related party interests. But under Section 2.2, we can only look between developer and purchaser. And in granting an extension of time, interests of purchaser must also be given priority so that we have a very fair, because everybody is losing here. There is nobody gaining. So in trying to come to a figure, certainly some restriction and some conditions need to be imposed and to be monitored therefore. Thank you. I think I will stop at this.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Pritam. Thank you so much, Dr. Pritam. And for all the attendees, I can see there's lots of questions on Facebook as well as on the webinar Zoom. Okay, I will just urge all the attendees on Zoom webinar, please post all the questions at the question and answer tab. Okay, please post all your questions at the question and answer tab so that we can read through the question easier. I noticed that there's some of the question has posted on the chat. If you could just copy and paste it into the question tab so that it's easier for us to monitor. And for all the ladies and gentlemen are on Facebook Live, are watching right now, please type in all your comments and your question in the comment box, so we would also look into it one by one. Okay, we have heard about the Housing Development Act. We are looking at like what Dato Pritam was saying just now. There's a lot of power has been allowing under the law. So let's just move a bit from the developer and purchaser. Let's look into the strata title management issue. But before we go into the strata title management matter, let me introduce our next speaker, not other than Yang Berbahagia, Tan Sri Dato' Teo Chiang Kok. Tan Sri Teo is a patron, past president of REDA from 1990 to 1994, and past chairman of REDA Selangor Kuala Lumpur branch from 1984 to 1986. Currently, he is a trustee of REDA Institute. Tan Sri Dato' Teo has also contributed significantly in various capacities on other boards and associations and continues to do so. And currently, he is a director of companies within the Si Hoi Chan Holding Group's business encompassing property development, including Bandar Utama, One More Hotel, property investment, oil palm plantation, financial services, private colleges, and etc. And he is currently also the Deputy President for Building Management Association of Malaysia, and as well as an advisor for Malaysia Association for Shopping and High-Rise Complex Management, PPK. Tan Sri Dato' Teo is also a co-chairman for Technical Working Group dealing with construction permits in PEMUDAH. Tan Sri Dato' Teo has been in property development industry for the past 45 years, has undertaken a multitude of projects including high-rise commercial, office complexes, shopping center, industrial and housing scheme. Currently, the group is developing the much sought after a new township, Bandar Utama in Petaling Jaya, in which a very successful One Utama shopping center is located in. Tan Sri Dato' Teo is graduated from King's College London and Master of Science from Warwick University. For his contribution, he was conferred the President's Award in 2011 by PAM and IEM Distinguished Member in 2013. He is also a member of Institute of Engineers, IEM, and also an industry advisor to the University Tunku Abdul Rahman. Let's welcome Yang Berbahagia Tan Sri Dato' Teo. Tan Sri?
Thank you very much, Haji Samsul. I hope everybody can hear me.
Yes, you are loud and clear.
Yeah. Well, after listening to all the uncertainties in the Housing Development Act, I think the issue of maintenance fee pales in comparison. Anyway, because of this pandemic, it seems to be fashionable for everybody to ask for reduction of fees, reduction of rents, and what have you. And parcel owners in a condominium have also asked their JMB and MCs to do likewise. But I think before we look into the possibility of it, maybe a few moments on the back to basics thing. First, the JMB and MCs are statute corporations under the SMA, Strata Management Act, and Strata Management Act and Strata Act. And it's not a business as such. And it is also not for profit business. And it is also not a charity. So the management fees is not picked up from the air. Each year, the MC will estimate the cost of maintenance and put it in a budget, which is then approved at the AGM. So after that, they have to manage the budget as approved by the AGM. So the call for reduction of maintenance fee, if there is the possibility, would also have to look at the review of the level of surveys and the type of services and modify it so that the budget may reduce, and so that the maintenance fee likewise can be adjusted. So the first question to ask is, would the parcel owners accept a reduction of service levels? Whether you can compromise on your safety, on your health and cleanliness, those questions have to be answered by the parcel owners themselves. But the hiccup here is that to vary the maintenance fee and to vary the level of services and vary the budget, one to have to call for AGM or EGM. Under this MCO condition, we are not allowed to call a EGM or EGM. So that is the dilemma at the moment. The other one is that, so what would be the solution? Can we use technology and poll the parcel owners by the MC putting up few proposals on changing service levels and changing budgets and changing maintenance fee, and post it for all the strata owners to agree and vote unofficially, because we don't have a proper structure to call the EGM, and whether this can be done and then to be rectified at the next AGM, whether it is a possibility or not. Or whether the MC could somehow put across that, okay, we can collect part payment, and again, at the next AGM, vote on a modified budget and modified maintenance fee that relates to the part payment. So whether all this can be done or not, in these circumstances, legally, I have to pass over to our legal eagle, Dato' Pritam, to answer these possible solutions, practical solutions. Thank you.
Thank you, Tan Sri. Thank you, Tan Sri. Thank you, Tan Sri, for posing some of the concern that I think it will be very, very dear to most of the people are staying in their apartment and also condominium now. I remember KPKT actually has issued a circular to all the stratified properties that there are no, all the public services are not allowed to be used. That's including the gym. You have the gym, but no, you cannot use the gym. You have a swimming pool? No, you cannot use the swimming pool. You have the children playground? No, your children cannot play at the children playground. Everybody must be used as must practice social distancing. Exactly like what Tan Sri is saying. All the parcel owners are ready for go the level of services they are currently enjoying, or how is it? And given up, everybody are looking at even some of the questions right now I'm seeing also, they're asking can the MC to reduce maintenance fee. But I think let's ask our legal experts, Dr. Pritam. Dr. Pritam, are you on the line right now?
Yes, I am.
Yeah, so Dato, so what is your recommendation on all these questions?
All right, before I go on to the question, let me highlight a case that has recently appeared in the Court of Appeal. This sets the powers of the GMB and concurrently MC. What are the powers of GMB and MC? It says that as a creature of statute, the powers of the GMB is limited and some circumscribed by the Strata Management Act, which regulates it, and extends to no further than that is expressly stated or is necessary or properly required to carry into effect the purpose of its establishment, may be fairly regarded as incidental thereto and consequential upon those things which the legislator has authorized. What the SMA has not expressly or impliedly authorized has to be taken as being prohibited. It's a very far-reaching definition of the powers of the GMB and MC. That means the GMB cannot do anything outside the powers that has been given to them. not only GMB, when we talk about GMB, we also talk about the GMB committee. We talk about the management committee itself. Their hands are tied. Their hands are tied by the Strata Management Act. Strata Management Act in section 149 also prohibit the contracting out from the act. That means what has already been in the act, the powers and duties, they have to follow it strictly. They cannot amend, alter, or use their own fanciful ideas to spend money. Example, if during MCO, if they think that they want to have a celebration during MCO or things like that, it is strictly prohibited. The duty and the power of the JMB or MC is well regulated. Regulated means the legislator has fixed A to Z. There is nothing outside of that. No matter how noble the intention of the parties is, they cannot contract out from the Strata Management Act. It is very, very specific. Next. Let's just have a quick look at the duties and powers of management body in relation to this issue of budgeting. In issues of budgeting. Under Section 21, this is also related to MCE. But for purpose of discussion, we use JMB. To properly maintain and manage the building land intended for subdivision and keep it in a state of good and serviceable repair. That is the function, to maintain and manage the building. Thus, the duty of the JMB is to maintain and manage the common property. They have no business to touch the parcel, but they maintain the common area. How do they then maintain? They have to impose charges. How do you impose charges? Before you can impose charges, you have to determine and impose the charges. Determine means there has to be a proper budgeting. If there is no proper budgeting in an AGM or an EGM, then this determination factor has failed. And the charges that has been imposed will also fail. So therefore, there has to be a determination, and determination will have to be in an AGM or an EGM for the charges to be imposed. Concurrently, for the purpose of maintenance and management of the building. Next, on the issue of sinking fund. Sinking fund, there may not be a budget for sinking fund, but it is for the purpose of meeting the actual. Of course, sometimes you have budgeted some capital expenditure, because sinking fund is for capital expenditure. You may have budgeted an actual or an expected expenditure. So what we have is roughly, generally, most JMBs, they collect 10% of the maintenance charges separately as part of the sinking fund. Both the maintenance charges and the sinking fund are actually approved at the AGM. And the management committee, the JMB committee, actually override what is imposed by the general body in an AGM. Under the Strata Management Act, there is no express provision granted to waive by the Act. In these circumstances, the JMB does not have the power to grant a waiver to charges and contribution to sinking fund. There is also no power given by the SMA to waive late payment interest, because late payment interest is also decided at the AGM and already decided 10% of the late payment is 10% per annum. And once having been decided, the management committee cannot reduce the interest payment or to provide a discount. A JMB cannot, by law, waive LPI, grant a discount to parcel owners or proprietors. So what are the practical solutions? Let's look at them. What are the available options that one can consider? if the objective is to relieve the burden of parcel owners, you see now many parcel owners will lose their job, they may get a reduction in salary, things like that. So it has become, it's going to affect the whole spectrum of parcel owners in the country. And over the period of time, notwithstanding the AGM says it is to determine and charge, some JMBs and some MCs do have extra funds. They have extra. I'm not talking about reduction in charges, but I'm also thinking of using the extra fund that they have collected over the years, which will result in monthly payment to be reduced and to pay the usual charges on a monthly basis. The process the JMB has to do is to reduce the charges and contribution to sinking fund. But this can only be done by an AGM and EGM. As we all know, the KPKT to FNQ has already stated that there cannot be an AGM or EGM during the MCO. That is in the effects issued by KPKT. I think generally, if you look at the law too, in an MCO period, there is no possibility of holding an AGM. When we talk about AGM, there must be physical presence of the parties. This physical presence of all the purchasers will conflict with the MCO. Therefore, how do we move forward? I will come up with the answer later. Luckily, we have in the third schedule paragraph 6.6 an installment payment scheme. For this, it is already provided for in the third schedule. The JMB or the MC can actually enter into an installment payment scheme. That means you are not deferring, you are not reducing, but you are just deferring the collection of the service charges for a period of time. This is already provided for in the third schedule. You can enter into an installment payment scheme with a defaulter. He must be a defaulter and extend time for payment of charges. This can be done. You can't waive, but you can extend time. And this is provided for in the third schedule, which is the standard bylaw applicable to both commercial and residential properties. As we know, KPKT has come up with some guidelines over the period of time. Are these guidelines legally enforceable, these administrative guidelines, or we need more than pure guidelines? On the other hand, regulation would regularize all administrative guidelines issued which do not have the force of law. To my mind, it do not have the force of law. This recently what KPKT has issued, if there is any offences, it will only related to provision under the Prevention and Control of Infectious Disease Act. Has nothing to do with SMA. If you commit anything under those guidelines, it's an issue under the Prevention and Control of Infectious Disease Act. We have to have something under the Act itself. Because what is the status of guideline? Next. As we have this classic case of office park development and Surinder Singh, he says, it is the view of this court that administrative guidelines are precisely that. They are just guidelines and have no weight in law. So it is not legally enforceable, the guideline. So what next can the ministry do or COB do? There is section 1550 of the Strata Management Act. The ministry can come up with a regulation. Regulation is easier than going to parliament, because regulation only the minister need to sign and it has to be gazetted. Of course, you have to go through the process of going to Attorney General's office and getting it ready and gazetted. But it's still a much easier process than going to parliament and have something enacted. Of course, you can come up with a COVID-19 Special Measures Act. But pending that, under the current legislative framework, Section 150 of the Strata Management Act, if we can come up with some regulation relating to one, that in such circumstances, the AGM and EGM can be done by way of an online poll rather than physical presence. And some conditions can be laid there in this regulation on a temporary basis, what can be done and what cannot be done, so that the decision is actually the decision of the JMB, of the AGM or an EGM, and not of the committee. So the regulation can spell out a proper methodology. Or alternatively, next. The minister also has a power of exemption under 151. The minister may, after consulting National Council for Local Government, order publishing a gazette, exempt a person or building or class of person subject to such terms and conditions. They can exempt that during this period, you need not call a physical meeting. It can be done alternative by online poll so that a decision making can be done. It has to be done because, in my mind, it is not just the MCO period. I think the MCO period will be extended until a vaccine is found. So this gathering of a few hundred people, because some projects have at least 1,000 people there, is not going to be possible in the near future. But the public needs some benefit now. And if the JMB or MC feels that they have sufficient funds, without lowering perhaps the service requirement, then they want to implement it, then perhaps exemption or regulation may be the way forward. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Pritam. Thank you so much for your explanation. And we've seen that there are, like, I think it's clearly as what you mentioned just now, under the current Act and Regulation, JMB and MC does not have any power to alter any in terms of the charges, the late interest payment, and so on and so forth. Perhaps again, this is again lies within the minister that hopefully the ministry side would have can do something in a slightly much faster process instead of going all the way to amending the act or like what I think the others authority and others statutory body also looking at the additional the new COVID bill specifically to done for Malaysia. Yeah, I think amendment the regulation definitely would be a slightly faster process as compared with the Act. Okay, thank you so much for all the panelists for sharing all the information today. And let's look into the session now, which is the question and answers. There's a lot of questions here actually. Just let me go through some and let's for Dr. Som and also Architect Lilian Tay, so that you can answer as well. All right, this is I have received a few similar questions. Okay, this is from Jorain Tan. I received a notice of delivery of vacant possession dated 14 April 2020 from my developer, and I am required to collect keys within 30 days from the 14th of April, failing which I am deemed to have accepted the delivery of vacant possessions. In view of MCO, is such notice valid? What can I do in such a situation? If it is valid, should the owner start paying for the month of MCO service charges and maintenance fee? Maybe maybe Dr. Som or Dr. Pritam would like to take on this?
Can I answer?
Sure.
All right. If we look at just a quick answer to that is, if we look at clause 26 of the standard agreement, I think Schedule D or Schedule H, it says the delivery of vacant possession by the developer shall be supported by certificate of completion and compliance, and includes the handing over of keys to the building to the purchaser.
Mhm.
So the handing over of the keys to the purchaser is part and parcel of the handing over process. Certainly during this period, we do not expect the purchaser to come to the developer's office to collect keys, because that will be a breach of the MCO. To my mind, that is why we need some directive from the government on this type of situation. Otherwise, the poor purchaser, if we were to interpret that the deeming provision under clause 26F or 27 has already come into force, then the vacant possession, the maintenance charges will start to run. I think it's very unfair to the purchaser that the maintenance charges are running when he is actually not in the capacity to collect the keys. And since we do not have a force majeure clause, if there was a force majeure clause which will be applicable both to developer and purchaser, fine. In those circumstances, we can claim it. I think the ministry need to address this issue by in the exemption, or perhaps if the COVID bill is coming, then it has to be addressed. But better to be addressed by the ministry under the Housing Act rather than lump it within the COVID.
Any addition from Dato or Tan Sri?
I think the difficulty here is you're talking about sending a notice out and the buyer receive it on the 14th. Unless it's sent out before MCO, I think if there's anything being sent out, the developer is actually violating MCO. He's not allowed to go back to office to operate the office and print out, handover notice. So I think this is more a hypothetical case than the real case in this instance, unless it's a notice sent out prior to the MCO, and because of the delay in the post, the buyer receive it, on the 14th of April. Otherwise, any violation of the act, I don't think is legal.
Okay, Dato, actually, I just received the response from the person who asked the question. She actually received it on the 21st of April. The letter was dated of 14th of April.
I think it's illegal. To me, I think it's illegal because you are not allowed to go to your office during the MCO. So how did they send out the notice? I think it's something that is debatable.
Okay, all right. And Tan Sri Teo, any addition on that? Okay. All right. Okay, this is a question to.
I think maybe Haji Samsul, I just want to highlight here. I think all developers must play their role to be fair to buyers during this current time. And you must know that you are being watched by the government as well. If you violate the MCO, you can be actually charged in court. So I think in REDA, we do not want our members or fellow developers to violate the MCO and take advantage of purchaser during this current time.
Okay, that's also I'm taking cue from that. I have also been brought to my attention that lawyers issuing legal notices during the MCO period to house purchasers, saying that that the handover is delayed because there is a force majeure clause, things like that. I think,
but it's not legal because you are not allowed to operate during the MCO.
Correct, and this is not essential service.
Yeah, so the thing can come back if the buyer go and lodge a police report. It can come back and horn the developers or the lawyer.
My advice to lawyers also, be careful. Jangan main-main.
Okay, Dato, just taking out from there, what if they are those letters sent out was actually they are working from home? which actually is has been what the government has been all encouraging. I think the Ministry of Human Resource has been repeating this a few times. This is not a holiday. Everyone under the employment should work from home. What if all these letters are sending out during the time that they are basically they're operating working from home practice? And is this valid?
Dr. Pritam, you want to answer?
Yes, I think if you are operating from the house and the letter is prepared from the house, then you need permission for you to go and drop the letter in the post office. Because the postal office services are essential services, the postal services are continuing even today. So if you can get that permit from the police or from as a relaxation of the MCO, then it may be valid.
Dr. Pritam, may I ask, since the post office is open, the public can go there to post a letter. So why do I need to get a police permit to go and post a letter?
Because you are not going as a public. Public is different. You are performing a commercial function because you are acting as a developer, performing some commercial activities. To my mind, it is much more than just a layman trying to drop a letter there.
Okay, all right. Let's move on to some the similar topic. Okay, this is not towards the developer purchaser, but more towards to architect Lilian. Okay, this is the question pertaining to the developer and contractor. The question says, okay, appreciate if you could clarify further on the EOT granted to contractor under the force majeure clause in PEM contract, which has to be taken into account to loss and expense claimed by the contractor, if any. And standard period duration EOT for developers and purchasers could be an objective way forward, but this may not be accepted to the main contractors for building works contract because it involves a lot more parties. For example, the nominate subcontractors, domestic suppliers, manufacturers, and etc. at various different physical construction process stages aside. How do architects evaluate the EOT?
As mentioned, we would look at this delay to be a force majeure event in the sense that it is due to circumstances that are beyond the control of both parties, both the employer as well as the contractor. So, and thus, in this is considered, the event is the causal event is considered a neutral event, in which case the contractor would get the extended time, but would not be entitled to loss and expense. So, consequently, of course, we will then have to assess the separate claims that will, the extension of time claims as well, consequent to that from subcontractors. And it should follow the same manner that they will also get a consequent similar extension of time. But again, they should not be entitled to claims for loss and expenses on their side. It should follow suit, the same rationale between the contractor and the employer, and between the contractor and claims from his NSCs.
Okay, all right. Okay, thank you, Architect Lilian. Okay, this is something on the strata management. Most of the parcel owners are affected economically during this MCO. Due to this MCO, most of the facilities are to be shut down. There are reduction in operation costs in terms of utilities and etc. However, JMB JMB reduce these service charges during this period or issue some sort of discount without AGM and EGM? Is that possible?
Well, I think that Dr. Britam answered that with the installment clause. Maybe Dr. Britam wants to reinforce it.
Yes, as I said, that the committee itself do not have any power to waive, reduce the service charges or the sinking fund. But if they are defaulters during this, of course, they are going to be defaulters because many people are economically affected by the MCO and will continue to be economically affected for the time to come. Some of them are wage earners, their wage has been reduced, things like that. For that, the government has not come any stimulus package. But certainly, parcel owners who are paying maintenance charges need some sort of a comfort. Now, one existing provision is paragraph 6.6, which allows any late payment to be delayed by way of an agreement with the JMB or MC. And this delay does not waive or exhaust the maintenance charges, but purely delaying the collection until end of the month, end of the year, things like that. That is already provided for in our standard third schedule. We don't need further legislation on that. That can be implemented even without calling for an AGM and EGM. The committee itself has the power to enforce the third schedule.
Okay, all right. So, so they will be still using the existing framework that were stated in the third schedule. So to exercise on that. Yeah. All right. This is to okay.
Haji Samsul, can I explain a bit about FAQ here, because a few of them a bit confused as to the application of EOT.
Okay.
Maybe
sure.
maybe I can explain a bit more. I think there are a few questions. I think there are a few questions related to it. I think I mentioned just now earlier that REDA will be sending out FAQs to all developers and REDA members. This FAQ is not just a frequently asked question. This is more as a guide to you who can apply, apply through who, how long you get the response, what are the information required. It's all in the FAQ. It's quite detailed. And who can apply from the developers, because a lot of time developers will ask their staff, their clerk, their managers to apply. No, director must apply for this extension of time. The other thing is that in that FAQ, we also will mention, I mean, from the good office of the JPN, they have agreed that by a certain number of days, they will acknowledge receipt of your application. So the other thing is we also have actually specified in there to ask you to apply progressively. That means for people with a VP date due up to September to apply first. We don't want people with a completion date in 2022, 2023 to apply. Okay, so for those with VP date by September, I think there are about 158 of them. Recently, we did a survey. Thanks to all REDA members who have responded. We've given all your information to Ministry of Housing. So they will be awaiting your application. But of course, they are also closed. The office is also closed. So they can't actually process your application for now. Meanwhile, as I mentioned, the permanent solution will be for the Malaysian government to enact a temporary measure COVID-19 bill. So while waiting for that, they will process your application for EOT as well. So just wait. Maybe we'll send out later part of the day today, or if not the latest by Monday or Tuesday, we will send out to all the members regarding this application. You will still have to make an application to the Ministry of Housing. Okay, that's my explanation on this FAQ and the extension of time.
I think there's a lot also, yeah, I see a lot of developers on the line right now is very concerned on the direction of REDA. Yeah, thank you for Dr. Song for your explanation on the direction of REDA right now. Okay, just go through another question here. A foreign buyer is at overseas, unable to get their flight back to Malaysia to arrange the balance of payment and keys collection due to the order period by both countries. The outstanding payment since 29th of March 2020. buyer unable to arrange city payment due to limitation on the internet access. Due to the order period, buyer appealed developer to waive the late payment charges until he is able to enter to Malaysia. Question is, should the developer charge the buyer on the late payment charges under these circumstances?
I think based on the current act, the developers has a right to charge overdue interest. But because of it's impossible for transaction to happen during this MCO period, I think the developers should use their good office. That's why I say that this MCO is not only affecting developers and developers asking for extension of time. There are a lot of obligation by buyers that cannot be met as well. So I think for both sides, this is the time for us to use our good offices and use our best discretion to ensure that the relationship is something that we all value in future. So I think in this case, buyers can ask for exemption from the developers. And I think good developers will always look at it with due consideration.
Okay, Tan Sri wanted to say something? Add on? Okay, all right. Okay, okay, this is again, I think, kind of like very related to us right now. As we work from home, what about if the letter of BP, termination letter, demand letter for progress payment, and we send to purchaser by email? Is this valid?
To me, it's not valid because it's clearly spelled out in the SPA. It has to be by registered mail or delivered in person. Maybe Dato' Pritam, you want to add?
I think Dato' Som, you are very right. Just a quick look at the provision. It has to be sent by the party or his solicitor by registered post addressed to the other person's address mentioned above, or it is given by hand. There's only two ways it is allowed. Email is certainly out of the question. Notices sent by email are not valid under the standard.
Okay. Okay. This is the question from also from Facebook page. Okay. Question for Architect Lilian Teck and Dato' Som. During these MCO phases, there are two situations. One, contractor who previously not allowed to work. Two, subsequently, the government approving during MCO phase 3. Some contractors are allowed to resume. Will the condition of EOT and lot as expense claim be the same for situation 1 and 2?
Okay, I think the thing is this way. I think the government has allowed projects that have achieved 90% progress to continue, meaning that project that's near completion to continue. There's one of the type of projects that are allowed apart from IBS and G1 and G2, tunneling work, viaduct work, bridges and all the rest. But here we are focusing on the 90% and above to continue. But approval may be given, but the speed of the work may not achieve what it should be previously. And I think Lilian just now did explain that because of the period under MCO is due as is considered as a force majeure, so there's no loss and expense claim here. So depending on when the contractor actually get the real date to commence work and ramping up of the work to full capacity, because what MITI and CIDB has approved today is only to operate at 50% capacity, and working hours is from 8 in the morning to 5:30. You know, usually you work until 10 or whatever. Now local authorities can't give you longer than that. They follow the MITI and CIDB guideline of 8 to 5:30. And as far as I know, supply chain must also be opening in tandem. Otherwise, there's no meaning in contractor going to site. There's no concrete, there's no stone, there's no nothing, no bricks, you know, and professional services to operate. And I think just now a figure was shown by Lilian, 1,856 out of 19,000, which is less than 10%, has been approved as of 2 days ago. So you can see the coming back is very slow, even though we have been allowed to apply on the 13th of April. Today is already 23rd, 24th of April. So, after 10 days, hardly any contractor has actually started work on the ground. So this is a picture we are presenting to you. And it's good that the government realized that our industry has a great spillover effect to another 140 industry. And we employ 1.4 million people and pay an annual salary of about 40 billion, our industry, the construction industry. So this is something that we have been articulating to the government. And hopefully work will continue for those that are near completion soon. I use the word soon. They can start work soon. And of course, the progress will not be what it is. That's why I think all the parties concerned will have to observe and use the best discretion in handling this issue. It's something we not encountered before. Lillian, maybe you want to add?
Yes, agreed. There is a lot of uncertainty because every project will be affected differently. For instance, some of the, let's say a smaller project, they may be able to come up to the full pace of work quite quickly. And some larger projects, for instance, they have to wait for the tower cranes to be re-inspected by DOSH, by JKPP, a lot of inspections from the local authorities and safety authorities. So there's a lot of variables as to the delay caused in starting up work. This is what I mean by it is quite complex. It will be different for each one. And some of it may be within the powers of the contractor. So of course, that has to be assessed differently. For instance, if the contractor is still exceedingly slow to step up to work, then he shouldn't be getting the time for the full, for when he actually achieves his 100% progress back. Once works have started, the whole supply chain is being remobilized. That's why it is quite complex to put a standard extended time to be granted. Let's say it should the minister prevail on her powers to grant some extension of time to account for this COVID event. So there will be different periods of delay in addition perhaps to the period that may be granted, for instance, and that may have to be assessed differently and to look at whether the contractor had used his best efforts to get his works stepped up back to normal pace. So we do expect that it is not a clear cut, and there'll be a lot more discussion needed to agree on a workable, practicably workable solution that will enable the industry in general to move ahead very quickly after this. We do not want also to be embroiled in a lot of disputes that will slow down, I think, the recovery process. So it may be a combination of both, that there is a basic so-called automatic extended time that is granted across the board, and then some attendant time relating to how quickly the delays to step back up to work. I think it will probably need to be assessed differently. So it is we don't have the solution yet. This is unprecedented challenges and uncharted territory that we're looking at. But it does, I do see that there is good basis to prevail on the minister to make some base extension of time just to account for this event, which is clearly beyond the control of both. I'm sure purchasers on their side will say, oh, is the cost being passed on to them? So they still have to pay their interest rates on the extended loans. I think the government has mentioned that there will be a moratorium, but it's unclear whether on the payments of things like housing loans, but it's unclear yet at the time whether there will be any waiver, for instance, for interest that accrued during the extended period. So those needs to be addressed at the same time as well. I think in such situation, I think we must always be guided by the fact that no party should be benefiting from any of these decisions on extended time. And all parties should be sharing some equitable and fair amount of the losses, as mentioned earlier, I think by Dr. Som. Almost everyone, I think Dr. Pretam as well, everyone is losing. We're all losing. For instance, architects are going to have to do all these complex assessments, and we're not going to get any more fees for it too. So we are all losing. So, and not only that, we stand to be, questioned and disputed later. Should we make a decision that is, not to the satisfaction of one party or the other? So everyone is losing, and it's a matter of mitigating and allocating as fairly as we can foresee the losses among all the stakeholders, in the whole process of delivering a house, all the way from contractors, developers, the subcontractors, consultants, and of course the purchasers. As you know, many, even though some contractors have secured permit to commence work, many architects and engineers have also not yet received. So they also can't start. So there are also delays along these that we need to immediately address so that the situation does not become even more variable for everyone. I think we have also called for this, that when a construction project is approved to proceed, that the PSP, architect, engineers, and also the QS who is needed to value the work done should also, those firms should also be permitted to start. As mentioned, all of the consultants really, they will all have to do a lot more work, and we're not getting any additional pay for this. So everyone's got to pitch in, I believe, to get things going.
Yep. I totally agree as a fellow consultant. Okay, this is a question from the Zoom webinar, issuing pertaining to the legality of sending documents. Okay, question to Dr. Pritam. To confirm your statement, that is illegal for a property developer to issue any letters, notices, etc. to purchaser during MCO. Can or should the property developer to issue notice to the purchaser that there is potential delay to their homes? VP, thank you. And a comment from attendees, Dr. Nyo said, Dr. Pritam, the MCO did not stop people to do business, only limited essential business. Sending letters is the essential, so shall be valid. And also, this is also pertaining to the maintenance fee. If this installment aid is allowed and agreed, shall it attract interest? Thank you.
I think the question here is firstly regarding the notices that are being sent out during the period. As I said, what activities you are carrying out? You can carry out your activities in the home. There is no problem. You can do in your house commercial activities. But if you are taking a bulk to go and deliver it at the post office, or if you have found a way, maybe you send the letters by way of a grab, and it is accepted by the post office, there is nothing unlawful in that aspect. I have to qualify myself. Not every activity of posting letters is unlawful, but the activity of you doing a commercial activity outside your home, that will be unlawful under the MCO. Number one. Number two, the question of VP. Of course, if it is lawfully, letter has been lawfully delivered, and it has to be not by an email, it has to be by way of a registered post. If it is by registered post and you have received the letter, then the VP will certainly click in. But no developer in his right mind will be able to enforce saying that, oh, maintenance charges is now commencing. I think there have to be a give and take. If they have already given the VP for the purposes of reducing maybe their LED claim. At the same time, they must also give benefit to the purchasers that the maintenance charges and other charges which the purchasers do responsibility, and because of the MCO, the purchasers are not able to comply with, the developer must give some waiver on those obligations. Otherwise, I think it will be a serious issue. On the issue of installment payment, paragraph 6 does not talk about interest on late payment. They just allow you to do late payment, and there is no issue of further interest on late payment. That I think will be left to the individual DMB.
Okay, all right. This is another question. Hi, Dr. Pritam and Tan Sri Teo. Thank you for your sharing. I'm Heng, licensed land surveyor from Juroko Zenith. Since strata title need to be issued during vacant possessions, upon issuance of certificate of superstructure stage by the consultant architect, licensed land surveyor need to do the strata titles measure as site, prepare the strata plans and etc. to do the application of certificate of CPSP from JUPEM, allowing by doing the application of strata titles from Pejabat Negara Tanah dan Galian, so that strata title can be issued on the time during VP. Since we are not allowed to carry out the measurement as site during MCO, what time frame to issue strata titles during VP be automatically be extended due to MCO? Thank you for your advice.
I think that's why I think all of us have to quickly convince our minister to do something about her powers within 2.2. So all these uncertainties can be addressed with a change of the regulation. Would that be right, Dr. Pritam?
There is already provision in Schedule H.
Yeah.
That if you are not able to get the strata title out due to circumstances outside your control, like authorities are not working, things like that, you can apply for extension of time to give strata title. That does not stop you from giving vacant possession. Yep. You can, in these circumstances, once you get a certificate from the KPKT for extension of time to grant strata title, still deliver vacant possession within time.
Yep.
It's two
but that was mostly pertaining to the land office couldn't get the strata title out on time, even though you have done all your survey and applied in a timely fashion.
Assuming
so would this situation where the surveyor can't even survey apply for this clause?
I think concurrently the land office is also closed. So I think
right.
It will. I'm very sure the ministry will give it a very reasonable thought and give it an appropriate extension.
Okay, some of the questions here, okay, I think currently we are all referring to the Housing Development Act and also the Strata Title, Strata Management Act specifically. The questions comes about how about the impact on the commercial property as well as service apartment, which is under commercial title. What are the things that the impact and what are the solutions into this area?
I think the commercial properties, let me answer first. Commercial properties are not governed by standard SPA.
Yes,
so
right.
We do not know what sort of clause is inside there between the purchaser and the developer. I mean, there could be a force majeure clause in there. And if there's a force majeure clause in there, the developer and the purchaser can actually use that clause wherever is possible. So I think Ministry of Housing will not handle any application for extension of time, any appeal by buyers or whatever. I don't think so, because you are not governed by the HDA. And if for service apartment, if you have got HDA, you are then governed by the Housing Development Act, you know. And for those real service apartment which are being signed as a commercial deal, then you have your own agreement as well. So you have to fall back on your own agreement.
Okay. Any word from any advice from Tan Sri?
I think that's right. What Dr. Som has said. Commercial agreement do not come under HDA.
Mm-hmm. Mm. So which means those service for those residential fall under the commercial title, which is not using the HDA, it will not govern under this. So
Yes.
I suppose that we will need to look into a bigger holistic measure in the future COVID bill, I suppose.
Yes, I think so. But then there are chances that there is a force majeure clause in there.
Mm-hmm.
You see, because this force majeure clause was taken out when we amended the HDA previously. So
Okay.
in the other agreement, between the commercial agreement for commercial property, probably they are actually this clause in there, the force majeure clause in there, so they can fall back onto the clause. Otherwise, that's why we keep saying and telling the government that this temporary measure bill, COVID bill, is very important. It's not only affecting our industry, it's affecting leases, affecting tenancy and the rest. So it's not about SPA alone. So this will affect all businesses. This temporary COVID bill will actually affect all businesses. So it's important that the government look at it holistically and take it as something that will reduce the number of litigation going forward.
Okay, all right. This is something about very close to VP, which is the next stage of vacant possession. That is the DLP, deferred liability period. The question is, what about DLP ended during MCO period? Can the solicitor release the last stakeholder 2.5% while buyer could not submit their defect list?
Dato' Pritam, you want to answer?
I think it will be like a developer taking advantage of situation. And of course, legally speaking, the lawyers can release the stakeholder sum because it has fallen due. And there is no notice given to the lawyer during the period of the defect liability period for them to not to release the stakeholder sum. But having said so, I think the as a prudent developer, they should continue to extend the defect liability period for the purposes of maintenance and of the defect. If anything were to arise during the MCO, be fair to both parties. They can take their money, but they should also give that undertaking to repair for an extended period. That is all.
Yeah, that's why on this instance, we say that the temporary measure bill is very important. These are instances where buyers are at a disadvantage, and the government must look at it that this bill is not about helping developers. It's actually helping to resolve issue from both sides. So in this instance, I think the developer must use his good office. That's why I say at the end of the day, because of these incidents, I think developers should be given additional time to complete their project. Buyers should be absorbed of all overdue interest. I say that. And my appeal to financier as well, please waive the interest charged on the purchaser during this period of time. That's my appeal, so that three parties will all come together. Just like Lilian has mentioned, they will not ask for extra fees from the developers. So everybody have to play their role here. So in this instance, I mean, in this instance, it's not about win-win-win. It's about who everybody chip in to lose a bit lesser. That's all. I think as a citizen of Malaysia and the world, now at last looking at this COVID-19, I think we all have to work together to sail through this so that we come out stronger.
Yes.
I do agree with Dato' Som that, on the purchaser side, so that they don't feel that they are bearing the cost of this, that the banks need to look into a waiver for that period so that they get the time, but they're not bearing the cost of the extended tenure of the loan. I do hope that they will consider that as well.
Okay, thank you, Dr. So I think we are going to one of the last few questions. This is on what has been stated in their latest, I think their MCO phase 3, while MITI is allowing some work to be done. Okay, for the project, it is already 90% completions. What if the contractor obtained approval, but the works are only left for inspection by authority for CCC and G-form purposes? Since the related authorities are not working, what will be the solution for this issue? Even with the approval from MITI, can contractor claim full EOT as they cannot complete the work as well? Architect Lilian?
Well, as mentioned earlier, as MITI allowing applications for permit to start partial operation to contractors, all the attendant parties will need to be similarly go back to work and be allowed that. I don't think that the local authorities will need to apply to MITI, but obviously they also need to play their part, especially let's say if a project, those 90% project would be near to all the inspections needed towards CCC. So we do hope that as everyone makes the effort to get things going, that the relevant authorities such as Jabatan Bomba, the local authorities and the utilities, related utilities providers would also be there to be able to conduct the necessary inspections and to issue the clearance letters.
And Dr. Song, you have any add-on on this for between developer and contractors?
I think I agree with Lilian. At the end of the day, because government going to form a task force to monitor this project, so that government can actually reactivate the local authorities to start work and the agencies concerned like Bomba and the rest, so that inspection can be done. I think this is the part lah. So I think for developers who are at that stage, probably can highlight to REDA and also PEM, and then we can actually bring it up again to the authorities, because we have a continuous discussion with MITI as well. In fact, we have another meeting coming up next week.
Okay, all right. I think this is already close to 1:30. We have already extended almost half an hour now. Let's go through. Let's have one round of conclusion by all the panelists. Let's start with Dr. Song.
Okay, my appeal is that since a lot of developers listening in as well, and also buyers, and also other stakeholders, I plead to everyone to use your good office and common sense during this period, not go after each other's neck, and while we are hoping that the government will come up with a temporary measure COVID bill, meanwhile the door is open at the JPN later after MCO for developers to apply for extension of time, and at the same time for aggrieved buyers to write in as well, so that their cases can be taken up. So with this, we like to thank the JPN and the KPKT for listening to us during this period. They are also not working. They are operating at maybe 25% workforce. So we must understand the limitation, and of course, developers, once we send out the FAQ, you may start sending in your application for EOT, but my plea is please submit with complete details as spelled out there. Don't later on blame authorities for not assessing your application. Just like why out of 19,000 applicants to resume work, only 1,856 have been approved, because many of them don't submit with correct data and details. This is what I gather from them. So similarly, in this case, during the application for EOT, please submit complete information and make sure that it's submitted by the directors of the company. Remember, directors of the company. So there are a lot of questions we answer there, and if there are things that we have missed out and you need to get clarification, we also got a number there so that you can actually contact us so that we can try to answer you the best we can. So this is a service that we are doing even during this MCO period and working from home.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Som. Tan Sri Teo, you would like to have a conclusion?
Well, I think on the surface of it, parcel owners have a reason to ask for some review of their maintenance fees, especially apart from the economic situation. A lot of the facilities are closed. But we must bear in mind that although the facilities are closed, a lot of other services still have to be maintained. The swimming pool pump has to run, security has to be there, cleaning has to be there. So don't expect too much of a discount. And for the MC to try and go use the installment possibility to accommodate those requests. I think Dato' Pritam has found the route for the MC to effect what most of the MC would like to do anyway. Thank you.
Thank you, Tan Sri Teo. Architect Lilian Tay, any conclusions on your side?
I will reiterate that I do believe that I've seen the new machinery of government really stepping up to work very hard with the called meetings on weekends and sending out directives and instructions with the stakeholder groups even until late at night. So I do appreciate that. I think this whole this is an unprecedented event, and we have to act in sometimes unprecedented ways. Sometimes there are gaps in the law, and these gaps will now show up very clearly. The lack of provisions in some areas. Hopefully, that we will be looking also to fix that in the future. But I do believe that very important is to reiterate that whatever we do, a principle of allocating losses, risks based on to be as fair and equitable to all stakeholders, even in cases where the law seems incomplete or if there are gaps in our specific provisions. Dr. Som, I did say that we're not paid for the extra complex work of trying to assess, the attendant delays. And probably not for some prolongation as well. So we are all pitching in. But I would take this occasion to raise to you that many small companies and architects, engineers, many of them are SMEs. In fact, 90% of our companies are below 10, 15 people. So they're all facing cash flow problems. And so I do appeal on the development side, and also, of course, all the government's projects to help these companies also survive, not just developers and architects, and release all the outstanding payments to architects, engineers, and consultants.
All
suffering, let me tell you that.
So all the developers hearing it, they hear you, so they know what to do.
Yes, you did promise that you remind all your good radar. Most companies they have outstanding bills of up to 6 to 12 months of salaries in their outstanding balances. So help us too. Yeah. So that's my plea on behalf of my architects.
I'm so can just bring a remark.
Sure, that's right.
That Dato' Som was talking about approval for projects to resume. Only 1,008 out of 19,000 application.
Yes.
This is a plea to the government that when you come up with relaxation, make it easy. The amount of information they ask is, some of them to me looks very onerous and very irrelevant for resumption of projects, for instance. And that is why the number of projects that has been approved to date is so small. So if we can consciously, the government can consciously, when they want to relax something, make it simple and make it easy for people to apply. Thank you.
Totally agreed. I believe that Architect Lilian currently is also collecting some of the data on all these non-approved cases right now. Yeah. Okay. Let's go to Dato' Pritam as your closing remarks.
Okay. Thank you, Arman, for the invitation. Number one. Firstly, I must say that those lawyers who are advising developers, please make sure that whatever advice you give do not lead to litigation. try to advise something which is a win-win situation for the developer as well as the purchaser, so that whatever advice you give do not result in a litigation process later on. We must avoid litigation. Although there are rights of the developer and rights of the purchasers, but there have to be a give and take during this period so that both parties do not suffer a loss. Assuming you have given VP during the MCO period, certainly the purchaser is not able to collect. Maybe you can do the drawdown from the bank, but at the same time, you cannot start the maintenance charges straight away. So these have to be given to the purchaser. No maintenance charges will be charged. There will be no delay interest, things like that. As long as it benefits both parties, then I think we can proceed to BP. That's number one. Lastly, as a practicing lawyer now, since a lot of developers are hearing us, please also consider the fees that are outstanding from the because lawyers also have to do a business, and well, they are also running small tolong. Okay, thank you so much. I think it was a great pleasure to be in such an esteemed.
Thank you, Dato' Pritam. I have Dato' Andy also around on the screen right now. Dato' Andy, would like to have some closing remarks?
Thank you very much for the good session. Panel speakers has been excellent. Thank you very much, Tuan Haji Shamsul. I think this series, we have a lot of question, Q&A, and a strong participation. And I have been told by the organizer that we are having another group, almost this continuation of this topic, with another group of panel speakers, namely from the National House Buyer Association, Bar Council, and also certain members of Master Builder and Radar as well, and also architect. I see the question and answers that have been posted there. The PEMUDAH Secretariat will probably summarize some of them, and the answers can be shared in the PEMUDAH website. With that, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much to everyone for your participation.
Thank you, Dato' Andy. Okay, so once again, I would like to thank all the panelists. Thank you for Yang Berbahagia Dato' Dr. Engineer Andy Seo for their opening and closing remarks. And again, thank you for all the panelists, Yang Berbahagia Tan Sri Dato' Teo, Yang Berbahagia Dato' Som, Yang Berbahagia Dato' Pritam, Architect Liliente. And again, thank you MPC and PEMUDAH for organizing this series of webinar for today's topic, Impact of MCO on Vacant Possessions Handover and Strata Management Issues, the Practical Solutions. Before I end, I would always like to urge everyone, please stay at home, stay healthy, and stay productive. Okay, thank you so much. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.